Welcome to Extraterrestrial Reality. The James Webb telescope has identified a planet that is 120 light years away from Earth that apparently harbors life. Now, keep in mind the James Webb telescope wasn't launched until just December of 2021, and here we are already, not even 2 years later, it's found a planet that has life on it, apparently. So when you keep that in, when you have that in mind, it makes you realize, well, it's very common apparently, right? Life in other worlds is throughout the galaxy, throughout the universe, is something that's very common. It makes me realize that, yeah, for sure, there's most certainly other life forms out there, and not only that, some of them are more advanced than the human race, and that explains the beings that are here and the ships that are here that are not man-made, obviously, that perform in ways that our aircraft cannot, and also it also explains the encounters many people have with all different sorts of different kinds of alien beings, things that are obviously intelligent but do not look like us at all. Anyway, here's an article. This is from Bro Bible. NASA's James Webb telescope has discovered possible signs of alien life. It says NASA's James Webb telescope has discovered possible evidence of alien life in the atmosphere of a distant exoplanet named K2-18b. This huge discovery, accepted for publication in the astrophysical journal Letters, reveals that researchers using the James Webb telescope found a molecule called dimethyl sulfide, or DMS. This is important because DMS, at least here on Earth, can only be produced by living organisms. So that means most likely there are living organisms on K2-18b, 120 light years away from Earth. Now, it's interesting, James Webb telescope, which basically is much more advanced than the Hubble telescope, it was only launched in December of 2021, and then a year later, 2022, we got the first images from the James Webb telescope, and here, a year after that, we find a planet already, just like that. Bingo, there it is. Looks like there's life on it. There's DMS there. That means most likely life. Anyway, continuing here, it says K2-18b, which is 9 times the size of the Earth and located 120 light years from here, also has carbon dioxide and methane in its atmosphere. The detection of these gases could also mean that the exoplanet has water. I'll bet the bank there's water there. I'll bet the bank. Anyway, on Earth, DMS is only produced by life. The bulk of it in Earth's atmosphere is emitted from phytoplankton in marine environments. Lead author of the study, Nico Madhusudan, an astrophysicist and exoplanetary scientist at the University of Cambridge, told BBC News. Our findings underscore the importance of considering diverse habitable environments in the search for life elsewhere, he said in a statement. Traditionally, the search for life on exoplanets has focused primarily on smaller rocky planets, but the larger Hycean worlds are significantly more conducive to atmospheric observations. Next, the researchers will conduct follow-up research with the James Webb Telescope's MIRI, mid-infrared instrument spectrograph. These results are the product of just 2 observations of K2-18b, with many more on the way, explained research team member Savas Constantino of the University of Cambridge. This means our work here is but an early demonstration of what Webb can observe in habitable zone exoplanets. So this is only, let's keep that in mind. This is only a small demonstration of what the James Webb can do. So we're going to find more planets. Wait till you see. There are going to be other planets that are going to be identified as potentially harboring life, and at some point they're probably going to be able to prove this. So it's going to be very interesting. Madhusudan added, our ultimate goal is the identification of life on a habitable exoplanet, which would transform our understanding of our place in the universe. Now, let me just stop there for a second. My understanding of our place in the universe was transformed a long time ago when I realized that there's already beings from some of these other worlds that surround us here for whatever reason. We don't know why. Probably just explorers. I mean, when you really think about it, there's a lot of beings out there. I think that there could be just I think we could be infiltrated right now by beings from various different places, various different locations throughout the galaxy, maybe even from other galaxies. We just don't know. I think it's possible that there are extraterrestrials here that are up to no good. Or maybe it is good, we just don't know it, right? But maybe these greys and reptilians and mantids, which seem to be working together on some project to create a hybrid race of beings for whatever reason. Maybe they're trying to take over the planet that way or something like that. But whatever the case, right? There's other beings in addition to those. I study this on a regular basis. I'm always coming across different stories of encounters with creatures that do not jibe with the common ones that are seen, that a lot of people deal with. A lot of alien abductees seem to deal with all the time. The greys and the reptilians and the praying mantis style creatures. For instance, I was just reading an article here earlier. Something that happened in 1965 with some very strange beings. And there's a drawing here, too. For people who are watching the video version of this, I'll pull up this drawing as we go through this little article here. It says, and this was from patrickgross.org. He put a collection of different stories of UFO encounters and alien encounters together. And here he had a brief summary of this event from 1965 that occurred in Renton, Washington. And this was also featured recently on Preston Dennett's YouTube channel. He had this was one of many cases he was talking about, but I want to focus just on this one for now. It says here, several ufology sources reported that on August 13th, 1965, at about 7 a.m. or 7:30 a.m., Mr. Ryerson from Renton, Washington, USA, dropped off by car his two daughters, Ellen Grace Ryerson, age 16, and Laura Jean Ryerson, age 13, close to Renton at Yas Narita's bean field on Russell Road, where the girls apparently worked. As he drove away, so he's taking his daughters to this bean field. They're going to go to work for, in the summer, probably a summer job. They're teenagers. It says here, as he drove away, Mr. Ryerson noticed two unusual, quote, persons, end quote, walking along the side of the road next to the bean field. Ellen Grace and Laura Jean approached these two very unusual beings walking next to the bean field. At first, they thought it was people dressed in Halloween costumes. But as they got closer, they realized that they were something they had never seen before. These persons were described as not human, gray-colored like stone, both wearing sleeveless purple vests with V collars over white shirts, and one was 5 foot 2 inches tall, the other 5 foot 5 inches tall, or both about such heights. The first, quote, person, end quote, was described as like a gnome and wrinkled, wearing a funny little hat. He was dancing and jumping around in front of the other being as they approached. He was making a cackling sound that the girls thought sounded like laughter. The other being had a very unusual head. His face was gray, but the back of his head had a pulsating bulbous extension with veins showing through it. On the rest of his cranium, there were large pores, and this part of his head was white. His eyes were described as like a frog's eyes. In his mouth, he had a little pipe, and he was blowing on it, making a shrill sound. Now, I'm going to stop there for a second. Now, there's an image. There was a drawing here of this, of the second creature. I would have liked to see a drawing of the first creature, too. But very, very strange looking, I must say. It has a picture of I don't know what you'd call it, like some sort of a pipe, or it shows the picture of the back of its head. It looks like blood, where it says blood and veins are pulsating. It has this, and the whole top part of its head, the crown of its head, all the way up toward its face, it was white with all these big pores on it. But then its face was gray, and it had a frog-like eye. They only saw one of its eye, and had some sort of a whistle or something, or a pipe in its mouth, and it was making a crazy sound with it. The white material it had underneath the purple vest, it was like something like white satin. The pants top was all in one, and it was the white material was all white and shiny, very strange looking. But anyway, here it continues. It says the descriptions are somewhat differing in the ufology sources, which makes it impossible to differentiate exactly the descriptions of the two beings. Some sources even claim there were three beings. Mentioned are expressionless faces, bulging eyes, white domed heads with white dots where there is hair normally, gray shirt and pants. One was called elf-like or a gnome, sizes being, however, quite similar for the two or different. One source mentions that the clothes had deep pockets and one being had its hands in the pockets, so the girls did not see what its hands were like. Ellen Grace feared that they were going to grab her, so she yelled at her sister to run. The girls fled, and when they looked back after running 50 feet, the beings were nowhere to see. The occurrence was apparently told to the local police in Kent and the Washington State Patrol, and then apparently appeared in the press, then was published in various manners in numerous ufology sources. So some people say there were three beings, and then some sources say there were two. But whatever the case, these beings looked really weird. And I don't think, these don't sound like they were connected with the common greys or common reptilians or common praying mantis creatures. These are a lot different. And there's a lot of stories like this. There's so many stories out there where people encounter these creatures that look nothing like anything anyone has ever seen before. I just talked about recently the Johnny Sands story. This musician, country singer back in the 1975 saw UFO, and then shortly afterward he was approached by these beings, which were decidedly not human. But his description of them, he actually had an artist draw them, the beings for him, and they looked completely different than any other description we've ever heard of before. And I've been suggesting recently also that perhaps men in black are actually part of a group of extraterrestrials that are already here, that have infiltrated our planet and are basically infiltrated some governments of the world, particularly the United States government for sure, no question. And they are basically enforcers. They are people that when strange things happen, men in black are sent out to find out, okay, because they for some behind the scenes, they've claimed this world for themselves, and they don't want any other alien being coming here and trying to claim it for themselves. So when weird things happen, they go out and they send out their men in black who aliens in disguise, perhaps hybrids, who knows, whatever, in a lot of cases, not all cases, but I think some cases men in black are extraterrestrial. Send them out to question the people who encountered these things, and because they want to find out more information about, okay, what did you encounter? Okay, and then scare them into not talking about this publicly. But yeah, I think that's what's possible here. But I just want to point out that, there's a bunch of different weird things out there, and I think that our planet, it's almost just like an island. We're an island in space, just and there's visitors coming here on a regular basis, constantly checking us out. How many times have you heard stories where people witness extraterrestrials taking soil samples? They'll see a landed craft and they'll see some little beings out there taking soil samples. Obviously, if you're visiting a new planet, that's going to be something you're going to want to do. I think this is what we're going to be doing. I mean, look what we're doing right now. I mean, we would be doing the same thing, wouldn't we? I mean, the human race, as we go on and we move forward, at some point we're going to be traveling to other worlds. I mean, if you just look at the progress we made in the last 150, 200 years, it's incredible, right? I mean, look at what's just with this James Webb telescope story, finding a planet out there that apparently harbors life. Another 100 years from now, what are we going to be doing? 200 years, 300 years, 400 years, 1,000 years. We're going to be searching the galaxy for other planets. And when we find planets that have life on it, what are we going to do? Say the life is not as advanced as we are. We're going to land there. We're going to check it out. We're going to investigate. We're going to keep our distance. We're not going to want the beings that are there, the inferior beings, technologically. We're not going to want them to see us. We'll try to do our best so they don't. But sometimes accidents will happen, and they will see us. But that's what we do. We're interested in finding out more information. We're interested in the mysteries of the universe, and exactly what is happening here with other beings is what we're going to be doing later on. I always wonder too. It's interesting to think about this. It comes to mind is you wonder, like, I think that there are various, could be thousands, millions, who knows how many different creatures are coming here, different beings are coming, intelligent beings are coming here. And do they know about each other, or are they all on various levels of technology? You have to wonder. Like I wonder about that. I mean, one UFO might be more advanced than another one. Some flying saucers might have more bells and whistles to it because the race that's created it is just more technologically advanced than this other race that created this other flying object. I mean, how many are here? I just think that one of the problems here, I would have to imagine that, although I believe that the main reason for the cover-up has to be the reverse engineering, I do think that there are other considerations, and it's just the ego of man. The scientific world out there, I believe some people, it's going to really crush their egos when they find out that they're not that as intelligent as they think they are. That there are other creatures out there, other beings out there that are more intelligent than we are, and that than they are themselves. It's going to hurt people like Neil deGrasse Tyson, for instance. I don't think he's going to like it too much. He has trouble even considering any of the evidence, the strong evidence that we already have. So, it's going to be deflating to a lot of people out there. I think what's happening here, right? It's like, okay, here's the James Webb telescope. We just found a planet out there. It might harbor life. We need to do some more research, and we'll probably be able to say with the high level of assurity that yes, there is most certainly life there at some point, right? And then see, we discovered life out there before anybody discovered us. There's like some sort of effort, it seems, behind the scenes to let's make it look like we find life out there before instead of admitting that there's already other beings have found us. Like that's, for some reason, that's going to have some impact on the ego of humankind, it seems. I feel like that. And you know what I say? I say to hell with our egos. That's nonsense. That's childish. It's a childish way of looking at things. Yeah, so we need to look at this in an entirely different way. I mean, I don't think we need to worry about that. Hey, we were found first by somebody else, apparently. For all we know, we might have been put here by somebody else. We might have been created by these beings. We might be some experiment for all we know. We just don't know. There's so many questions, no answers. Anyway, moving on. Recently, I was talking with a person who has had encounters with extraterrestrials, and this person told me something really interesting. She said that when she had an encounter with an alien, it felt like she was actually in a spaceship and in her house at the same time. She said that the spaceship was superimposed in her room. And I thought that was really strange. And I was actually wondering after I heard this story that, what if sometimes where people get abducted or where people encounter extraterrestrials in a room, and it seems like other people there are knocked out or conked out or something like that. But what if that's not the case? What if what's actually happening is that the extraterrestrials are basically taking a snapshot of someone's environment and then in some cases, not all cases, but in some cases, taking a snapshot of the environment a person is in. And then making it seem like that's where they still are, like they're still in a room, in their bedroom, for instance. When they are not, they're actually in a spacecraft, and they don't realize it because there's a holographic image all around them that looks exactly like where they live. That's something I because when I heard this story from this person, the way she described it, she felt like she said she couldn't understand what was going on. She said she felt like she was in her room and the spaceship at the same time. It was almost like the room was superimposed inside this something else. Like she wasn't where she doesn't think it was her room. And that's when I started thinking to myself, well, what if it's possible that happens sometimes? I think that's something to think about. I mean, it's nothing really groundbreaking or anything like that, but I guess it's another possibility. I know, of course, many people who have encountered extraterrestrials were brought on inside craft. We've heard those stories number of times, but maybe sometimes some extraterrestrials take that little extra measure to make it seem like, well, we'll just recreate the environment, and really the people that they like, the rest of the family members that aren't being affected, perhaps people that aren't getting abducted, the person who is abducted is seeing them on a loop. Like, say someone falls asleep in a chair, they're really not sleeping in a chair, just that's what they're being shown. It's being superimposed or it's being recreated in a holographic image inside of the craft itself, and the person doesn't realize they're inside of a craft, even though everything looks like their actual environment in which they live. Just something I wanted to throw out there. I thought it was interesting. I never heard that before. Like this person actually said it felt like they were in their room and a spacecraft at the same time, and they couldn't understand it. This is the first time I heard something like that, and it's something to think about. Okay, and now moving on, I want to talk about something else here too that I thought was interesting to talk about. It's about crash retrievals. One of the things that you hear a lot from debunkers, and I've talked about this recently, is the fact that you hear that it is, there's no way these things are gonna come all the way here and then crash. Well, I think that's hogwash. Of course, as I pointed out before, I think that technology could fail. Doesn't matter how advanced you are, technology could fail sometimes, and things could crash. And also, I think it needs to be pointed out though that these things could be Trojan horses. These things could be controlled crashes. It's just a setup. It's just a way to infiltrate our society, to figure us out. I mean, and that's something that needs to be talked about more. I really believe that it's very possible. Like, for instance, say the Aztec UFO crash from 1948. Okay, so what if that was controlled? What if that was just one big setup just to get inside inside our government, to get inside information, to figure us out, to figure out how we tick? I think that that's something too that you don't hear ever. Debunkers won't even consider these kind of things because to them it seems too insane, too crazy, right? They can't think outside the box. To them, it's like, oh, there's no way that something could travel here 100 million light years to space and then they're going to crash. You're going to be crazy. Well, maybe that's not really what's happening in a lot of cases. Maybe sometimes it does. I think it does, right? I think again, I believe technology fails, but it could be that these are just what's happening here is that it's all done on purpose, right? It's all done on purpose. And I think that's something that we need to consider here. We need to start thinking about that because I do believe that some of these crashes could have been controlled crashes. I mean, the beings that people find, I mean, throwaways. I mean, if they're biological robots, like as suggested by Gary Nolan, then these beings who are controlling them, it doesn't matter to them if they lose them. They don't care, right? It's all a setup. For whatever reason, for whatever purpose, it's just to infiltrate us, to figure us out from the inside. Because the people who are going to recover these craft, they already know, these beings would already know it's going to be people at the top of this power structure here, right? And that's where they want to get to. That's where they want. That's where they would want to infiltrate, right? They're not worried about the yo-hos sitting out there like in the middle of Pennsylvania like I am right now. They don't care about us as much, right? They'll use us for their other if they want to abduct us for their other purposes or whatever, experiments or hybridization program or whatever. But if they want to get inside the government and start controlling us from the inside, right? They would want to go to the very top, and the way to get to the top is to smash down your flying saucer. Throw a couple of dead aliens in there, maybe a live one too, but all it is a way to get inside, to figure out who's in control, who's in charge, all of that, and who knows what else. I think it's something that we need to consider and think about because it could be something that I believe is happening or has happened. Also, I want to point out I had received a message today from somebody, and I want to address this because I don't think this is true. I received a message on Spotify from somebody who claims that I only that I debunk everything that happens outside of the United States, which that's totally false. Actually, Ray Bainbridge, who has commented before on stuff, he says he was commenting on this Solway Spaceman photograph podcast that I did, the most recent one, for the episode The Men in Black Who Investigated the Solway Spaceman Photograph. I suggested that it could have been the guy's wife. I don't know for sure, but I'm suggesting that it could have been the guy's wife who was in that picture, and they just forgot. And Ray says they have a double that apparently appeared in an Australian nuclear test site on the same day. So he was talking. There's more to the story. I pointed out, I said there was more to the article, and I did leave a link to it. I didn't get into the whole thing. And then he writes, I always find that you try and debunk anything outside of the United States. That's not true. That's just not true. And there's a lot of different cases outside of the United States that I think are extraterrestrial for certain. I think that the Rendlesham Forest, for instance, I believe that was extraterrestrial. I don't think it was anything else but extraterrestrial. That's what I believe it is. That's after all the research that all the stuff I've read on it, all the reports, the Colonel Halt, the tapes, all of that stuff. I think Rendlesham Forest for certain was extraterrestrials. That's me. Doesn't make me right, but that's what I say. The Ariel School, I talk about that in just about every other episode I mention it. I think that's the biggest case of all time. And that most certainly was not in the United States. That was in Africa, in Zimbabwe. And there's many other cases. I don't try to debunk. I don't debunk everything outside of the United States. That's absurd. So I don't know, Ray, what you're talking about. I think that this extraterrestrial phenomenon is worldwide. So I just don't agree with that assessment. So anyway, I just wanted to point that out. But thanks for the comment anyway. But no, me a debunker? No, here's the thing. I'm a realist. I mean, if there's something out there, there's things here in the United States that if there's something out there that I don't think is extraterrestrial, I'll say it, as everyone knows. I'm just trying to be realistic about certain things. Like for instance, I think the Skinny Bob videos are fake. That's my feeling on it. I believe that the alien autopsy, that was fake for sure. I said it was fake at the time in 1996 when it was released, but it was the guy who put it out later said it was fake himself 13 years later. I mean, there's some things out there that are almost obviously not extraterrestrial. And we need to when they're not extraterrestrial, we can't. People who study this aren't just going to shouldn't say, oh, I still think it's extraterrestrial. If you see Starlink floating around, you can't just it's Starlink. It's not extraterrestrial. So I don't know. This phenomenon is something that happens throughout the world, not just in the United States. And most certainly, I don't try to debunk everything. Some things I'm skeptical of, but at the same time, there's extraterrestrials here for sure, no question about it. And there are a lot of cases throughout the world, not just here in the United States. I don't say that. For instance, I think that the Vegas alien stuff, I think that's real. I don't believe that is a hoax. I think there's other stories right now going on in other parts of the world that need more investigation. For instance, the attacks by extraterrestrials in Peru right now. That's something I want more information on that. I've been following it, but there's not enough out there yet. I want more on that. And of course, I'm talking about and I guess the other thing you're probably thinking here is because I was talking about Jaime Maussan recently about the revelation that these beings are aliens that he showed during that Mexico UFO hearing recently. Well, Jaime Maussan has a record. He has a past. There's a history, and there's some baggage there. There's so you have to be. It'd be stupid to just that's real. I don't know that for sure. He presented some people on there that I think we need more people. We need and it looks like we're going to get it. There's some things going on right now. It looks like we're going to get some more investigation of that. It'd be great if these are alien beings. I hope that they are. I'd like to see Jaime Maussan, receive some sort of a vindication, because I like to, when you look at his earlier research, it was fantastic. He really dug up some great UFO videos that were captured by various residents of Mexico throughout the 90s. It was fantastic. It would show up on documentaries. He was great. And then, of course, the Roswell slides incident happened. I did not like the circus-like atmosphere that he created over that, and I have issues with that. So I just want to see some more information on this before I start, saying, they're aliens. I don't know. I don't know what they are. I'm not sure. Anyway, I just want to go through. I want to focus on this. Some of the I asked the question for that recent episode. What do you believe is a likely explanation for the Solway spaceman photograph on Spotify? And I have received some answers here. Fred says, just a kid when I saw this in some magazine. It scared the crap out of me. It's just too weird to be made up in 1964. Those shoulders and shape ain't no woman. MIB monitor other ETs, Twilight Zone like. And then 4DV0JSGOZCBIP9FVK5K7CHUA. What a great name. What a great name. That person says probably a cloaked extraterrestrial. Okay, David, he says it's his wife. The white helmet is actually the moon. If you take out the girl and look up the moon phases for that day, it looks like a helmet. Coincidence? Rob Aldrich says it's a bleed over from the dimension adjacent to ours, which is what sightings such as Sasquatch actually are. They've always shared this world with us and can come over here under certain circumstances. David Richardson says the guy was probably thinking of... David Richardson's talking about something that was stated. I talked about. I was reading an article about this spaceman, Solway spaceman, and in the article it was mentioned that maybe because the men in black that showed up after the hoopla surrounding the Solway spaceman, the men in black referred to themselves as number 11 and number 9, and the writer of the article said, well, that person probably got it from James Bond movies or the TV show The Prisoner. And I pointed out in the podcast that The Prisoner didn't air until 1967. So it couldn't have been that, because that was 3 years later. But anyway, David Richardson says the guy was probably thinking of Secret Agent, or AKA Danger Man, with Patrick McGowan. Patrick McGowan was the star of The Prisoner and also Secret Agent, or AKA Danger Man. So that's what he was saying. Yeah, the writer probably just made that error. And then Terrence Finan says, a twist to the tale, the UK, where we're going to fire a rocket in Australia. It may be nuclear. The spaceman appeared. They were the double of the spaceman in the picture. Yeah, there was something with rockets getting fired. There was more to that story than what I talked about in that podcast. I didn't want to get into all of it. There was more to that happened afterward. But there were rockets getting fired nearby. Some people say that it might have had something to do with that. But anyway, I also had a poll on this one because there were two questions I wanted to ask, and you could only have one poll and one question. So I asked one in a question format where you had to write out your answer, and I did a poll, and there's 48 votes so far. And I asked this question: who are the men in black who visited the Templeton family in 1964 to ask questions about the Solway spaceman picture? So far, 48 votes with 26 days left. 3 people, or 6.3%, say hoaxers. 4 people, or 8.3%, say weird, nerdy LARPs. 14 people, or 29.2%, say extraterrestrials. And 27 people, or 56.3%, say government agents. Wow, I just don't know. I don't know. Like I was saying in that episode, at one point I ruled out government agents, but then I'm thinking, you know what? I think in some cases maybe men in black are government agents. I mean, think about this. When you have someone investigating UFOs from the government, especially a case like this, right? I mean, you're going to say you send out agents and you say, yeah, we're from the Air Force and we want to investigate this and blah, blah, blah. And then the newspapers get a hold of this, and they say, "Oh yeah, the Air Force is investigating the Solway spaceman, and they sent out their special team out there to investigate it." Well, that's gonna stick in people's minds then. So maybe it might have been decided a long time ago, back in the late 40s, early 50s, different governments of the world. In some certain cases, when they want to investigate things, they send out men in black, people dressed up in these black suits, ask weird questions on purpose. It's all by design, because in this way, when people tell the story about the agents that came to them, no one's going to believe them in a lot of the cases, because it sounds too crazy. It sounds too crazy. That's possible. You know, I was reading some of this Donald Kehoe's Flying Saucers from Outer Space. Donald Kehoe, of course, was a retired Marine Corps who studied UFOs back in the 1950s, put out a lot of books. He's basically the first UFO investigator, the first big-time UFO investigator, was an insider, had a lot of inside information. He was in this book, Flying Saucers from Outer Space. Kehoe talked about like this. He was talking with different Pentagon insiders at the time, and he would write about it in these books that he was publishing throughout the 50s. And he talked about one of the most famous cases, the Flatwoods Monster case. And here at this time in this book, it wasn't referred to that; it was referred to as something else. But I just want to read this little section. It happened. It says here, of all the eerie saucer stories, this was the weirdest. There is good evidence that this was merely a case of autosuggestion and hysteria, but it has some peculiar angles. The action took place near Sutton, West Virginia on the night of September 12th. Early that evening, a glowing object was seen by thousands of people as it flashed over the state. Among those who saw it near Sutton were Mrs. Kathleen May, her 3 young boys, and a 17-year-old National Guardsman, Gene Lemon. Though they couldn't be sure, they thought they saw something land on a nearby hill. It was dark when they climbed the slope, and Gene Lemon turned on his flashlight. The first thing they noticed was an unpleasant, suffocating odor. As they neared the spot where the object seemed to have landed, 2 shining eyes were reflected in the light. Thinking it was a raccoon on a limb, young Lemon caught it in the beam. The light fell squarely on a huge figure at least 9 feet tall, with a sweaty red face and protruding eyes about a foot apart. As the light fell on it, the monster's body glowed a dull green. Then with an odd hissing sound, it started toward them. Terrified, Mrs. May and the boys fled down the hill. While Mrs. May was phoning the sheriff, her mother noticed a queer, oily substance on the boys' faces. Soon after this, their throats began to swell. Later, it was suggested that the monster had sprayed the boys with some kind of gas, but in the excitement, Mrs. May could not be certain. When the sheriff arrived, the fog was settling over the hillside. Twice he tried to get his dogs to lead him to the spot where the monster had been seen. Each time they ran away howling, and he gave up until morning. During the night, the Lemon boy became seriously ill, almost in convulsions. His throat, like those of the May boys, was strangely inflamed and swollen. Later, a doctor compared the effects with those of mustard gas. Just after sunrise, according to a Sutton school board member, a strange machine took off from the hilltop. When the sheriff and his men searched the area, they found tracks on the ground, the grass mashed flat, and bits of what looked like black plastic. There was no trace of the fearful-looking creature Mrs. May and the boys had described. And anyway, it was at one point it was suggested that there were 2 guys. It says here, one of Kehoe's sources told him that nobody was sent from the Air Force to investigate this, but at the same time there were people sent secretly in the guise of reporters for a magazine. So I think that's what happens sometimes. Now that hasn't been confirmed, right? It wasn't confirmed in this, but that's what he was hearing. There's more to this than that, more to this story than that. But I highly recommend this book if you don't have it. But it's interesting that it was thought that there were government officials that were sent, but they pretended they were working for a magazine, and the reason for this, right, was because they didn't want the like in the event that it turned out that the government had to tell the rest of the world, the rest of the country, that hey, these saucers are from outer space. These are beings from outer space coming here, right? Then people would remember this Flatwood story and say, yeah, the Air Force investigated that seriously, but by not investigating it seriously, but not investigating it at all, apparently, that makes it look like there was really nothing to this story. That those people were just seeing a raccoon and they just, it was mass hysteria. So that's why they did that. They would send out agents and have them in the guise of someone else, pretending, oh yeah, we're from a magazine, we're doing a story, could you tell? And that's how they gathered information, apparently. Now that wasn't, Kehoe didn't confirm that, but that was the suspicion that they did. The Air Force did send out some agents pretending to be writers for a magazine. So I think in some cases, yes, they are government agents, and maybe sometimes they do act strange. But then sometimes, like when you some of these stories, like the Johnny Sand story, for instance, there's some Men in Black stories. These things, I don't think they were agents. They're not agents. Apparently there's something bigger going on here. For all we know, the guys that showed up to the asking the Templetons questions. About the Solway spaceman, I think that it's possible that they could have been extraterrestrial. They could have been. We just don't know. We're not. I think in some cases, like I always say, I think in some cases it's extraterrestrial. I think in some cases it could be government agents. We just don't know. Anyway, I want to say thank you for joining me. Until next time.